Happy Thursday, everybody, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 14 of Cloud Foundry Weekly. As you can see, I'm here alone. We've got Nick is out on vacation with his family this week, so it's just going to be me on the show by myself today. Well, I won't say by myself. We do have some special guests, but we will not have Nick on with the show. We will be talking today all about data. So with that, I'm going to bring in my first guest, is going to be Greg Green. So Gregory Green, 25-year professional, man, you've been doing everything all. You specialize in cloud native data services, modern data solutions, application modernization. You kind of do everything data. And I can tell you, I work with Gregory, and he is one of the most knowledgeable data experts that I know, right? You got a tendency to be able to put these things and put data in a way that people love. Anything you want to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I want to say hello, everyone. It is an honor and privilege to be with you, Mr. Nicky, sir. I hope you don't mind me calling you sir. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. It's an honor to be here, and yeah, let's talk.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself before we bring Mark on. What you've been doing here lately. Where you come from, what your background is, how you got started in data.
Yeah. Again, my name is Gregory Green. I am what's called a solution architect. I'm based out of North Carolina. Shout out to all of my fellow North Carolinians. Originally from New Jersey. I've been doing software development and software architecture for a while now. I started out kind of being, I tried to do everything, Nicky. And let me tell you, that was stressful. So I tried to narrow down the things that I would work on. And I really fell in love with building like what's traditionally called backend services, working with databases and messaging solutions, right? I've been a long-time Java user, a long-time Spring user. And nowadays, I am kind of focusing in that area, mainly in the what we call pre-sales. So just trying to advocate how our customers could use these awesome data products that we have within our Tanzu portfolio to solve all types of unique, challenging, and interesting data needs. So that's a little bit about me.
Yep, that's awesome. Well, like they say, a jack of all trades does nothing well, right? So I'm glad that you specialized. Again, we've worked together on a couple accounts. I love the way that you're able to take data and break it down. I'm excited about this show. I know we've got a returning favorite. So, Mark Fynes, caught him when he was doing something else. And welcome back to the show, Mark.
Hey, Nicky. Good to see you, Greg. Glad to be back again. And yeah, when we were just chatting about this topic today, and I've been saying it for the longest time, the services in the back of your Cloud Foundry that you have in that marketplace are its superpower. And are they the origin on the map, or is it the app? We think, do we attach a database to an app, or is that an app that's hanging out of some big data service or other capability? And I thought there's nobody better than Greg who really stitches these two words together for us so well. So glad to be here.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. When we talk Cloud Foundry, when we talk about, Tanzu application service or Tanzu platform for Cloud Foundry, most people think of the apps. Hey, everybody remembers the old haiku. Here's my code, run it for me. I don't care where. But people generally forget about all the back-end services, and Cloud Foundry is a powerhouse when it comes to putting those back-end services. And I'm sure when we get into this, I'll be able to share some of my personal aspects of what happens with, back-end services and how that we use those on the platform. But yeah, the whole purpose of this show today is to talk about kind of that, the redheaded stepchild of the applications, right? You don't have an application without data. Right. But people tend to forget about it. It's all about the flashiness of the application. But let's talk about what really, really makes it work. So, and I've got a banner on screen that I shouldn't have. There we go.
Yeah, I try on top of that, Nicky, that the old days, we heard about the Oracle app or the DB2 app and those monoliths on top of one huge database. And as we go to the microservices, you can't be tying them back to that centralized single database all over again directly. That you got to use APIs. So these things need to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yep.
That puts new pressure on it. So we can't just have with the velocity we get in CF push, we need an equally fast way to give ourselves some caching, messaging, or data services for our microservice, for our domain. So it's really peanut butter and jelly, right? Services and apps.
Yep. And, I'd love to get Greg's take on this because that's one of the things, Cloud Foundry microservices was the right. Let's break all these monoliths down into microservices. But that same concept can be applied to the data aspect as well. We've got everybody for a while was all about these huge data lakes. Well, these applications don't need to pull all that data. And that's one of the things I like about Cloud Foundry and the platform with its data services is I can, as an application owner or developer, I can have my own database with just the stuff that I need. Now, whether we pull that from a data lake or whether we're just hosting that for ourselves, we kind of take that microservice architecture and we apply it to data, or we can apply it to data. But we're going to talk about some products today that also, that data lake. How do we take that data lake and partition that out and make it usable for applications? So, before we get started, Greg, let me get you to comment on that real quick, and then I got to ask you the thing that we ask every person that comes on the show. But let me hear you about microservices with data first.
Yeah. Well, I had the opportunity to share for within the organization to try to advocate this whole need for data services. So I asked this question. I'll ask the audience here. I want you to close your eyes and imagine an application that doesn't use data or information. That's really what data is, right? It's information that does not use data in any way, shape, or form. And if you can think of a useful app, like I would say, like you're probably the one of the most creative people that I know. Most people, when they think about like an app that doesn't use data, they're probably thinking about a Hello World or some sort of app that just presents an emoji. I mean, and data and applications really, like Mark said, they're peanut butter and jelly. And many of our customers that are on that app modernization journey, right? They're breaking down their monoliths. Maybe they were like legacy .NET framework, they're moving to .NET, or J2EE that they're moving to containers, right? Oftentimes, that's really the first step. But the next step is, hey, that data, that monolithic database that Mark was talking about, that's still sitting in maybe a mainframe or sitting on premise somewhere that nobody wants to touch and everybody is scared to touch. But this new modern app that you're building and you're investing in, it needs that data. So how does it get it, and how did it get it effectively, and how is it run? You run your modern apps with the data that it needs. Well, you need data modernization. That's really like the next step in the evolution for solutions.
Absolutely. Well, before we get started, because I know you've got some slides you want to show, you want to walk us through some of these data products. But before we get started, first question we ask everybody, Mark, we're going to skip you because you've done this before. But Greg, what was your first CF push experience? What was your first CF memory, Cloud Foundry memory?
Yeah. Like I said, I've been in this. I've been blessed to be in this industry for a bit now, and I was really introduced to Cloud Foundry when it was first introduced. At that time, I was working for a company called EMC. I had an opportunity to go to my first Spring One conference. It was I believe it was in Chicago, long time ago. And that was the first time I remember them presenting this idea of having this app and pushing it to the infrastructure. They showed it being pushed. They showed scaling up the number of instances. And I thought to myself, man, that is cool. So yeah, that was it. And then as part of EMC, at the time we had a consultant or professional services organization, and we had the privilege of onboarding Cloud Foundry to many different customers. So yeah, a while back where I had my first push experience.
That's awesome. And just so you know, we did kind of sign you up here based off, close your eyes and imagine an application that doesn't use data. If anybody can come up with a useful app that does that, I've signed Greg up to buy you dinner.
Oh, yeah. or at least get an emoji smiley face from me.
There you go. Well, dinner, emoji, smiley face, tomato, right? All right. Well, what do you got for us? I know you got some slideware. Do you want to go ahead, and do we just want to jump right in and me and Mark will ask questions as we go through?
Yeah. Let's jump right in. And yes, let's walk through this together. And more interaction, the better. This is really a summary of the tools or the toys we have in the data portfolio toolbox. And I'm hoping that a lot of these names, a lot of these icons are familiar to the audience out here. Like many of these are probably the most popular open source data services where you can just get started on your local machine, building some POCs and push it to a production because it's available for free. So, for example, products like Postgres and MySQL. Hey, did you guys know the most popular database period, open source database period, whether it's NoSQL database or key value pair or caching databases, the two most popular databases period for open source. Number one, Postgres. Number two is MySQL, right? So these guys have been in this space for a really long time. And there's also some very familiar names, but there's some new players that you may not necessarily know. So, for example, Valkey. Valkey is a new player in our portfolio. It's really a reaction to the changes that have happened to Redis. If you're not familiar with Redis, Redis is probably the most popular caching database. It's an in-memory sort of database. So since the data is stored in memory, it's really fast, or in other words, what we say, really low latency. But the customers that are using open source Redis, so we have been supporting Redis for years. Actually, if you don't know, Redis was birthed out of VMware. So VMware became pivotal, became the Tanzu division within VMware, right? So now that Redis has changed that licensing such that if you're running open source Redis in production today, you must have a commercial license. So to react to that, there is Valkey. It's a fork of Redis. And that is how this is the product that we're going to be supporting going forward, along with the entire previously open source community for Redis. And then we have we also have RabbitMQ. RabbitMQ it's been around for a long time. It's super reliable, very popular, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it in a little bit. But two products that a lot of customers may not necessarily know, or a lot of people might not necessarily know. One is Gemfire. Now, which again, I'm going to dive into Gemfire more, but the other is Greenplum. Now, Greenplum is based on Postgres. So think about, and it's really good for those analytical needs. So for example, imagine out there, you're building a data warehouse or data lake, right? And maybe you start out with Postgres and, for a couple of terabytes worth of data, hundreds of gigabytes, it works perfectly. But once you start scaling out to get more and more data, like hundreds of terabytes, even petabytes of data, right? There's just so many performance challenges. And you can only scale Postgres, but so much. So Greenplum is like a multi-parallel processor instance of Postgres. To your client applications, when you're accessing that data, that hundreds of terabytes worth of data, petabytes of data, you access it via SQL, and your client application doesn't even know that it's Greenplum. It just thinks it's Postgres. And it's also great for ML AI. So think about like the traditional artificial intelligence workloads. Like imagine you're a data scientist and you're training your models based on data, right? So what that often involves is maybe your data is sitting in some file somewhere, S3 buckets, maybe some databases, maybe not, right? But when you're training that data, you have to bring all of that data into memory, into your Python or your R-based application, and you're limited by how much you could do, right? Because memory is but so big. But imagine you can actually put your training workloads in a database in a scalable fashion. And so you could do your training on massive amounts of data, and you can do it in the languages that you love, like Python. And if you could bring along those useful libraries like pandas, like scikit-learn, so on and so forth, and actually run that in the database at scale, right? Where you could do not only training, but inferencing, that's really where Greenplum shines. And we have a new product to the portfolio, which is basically just a way to have fleet management. So if you got hundreds of RabbitMQ instances or MySQL or Postgres, right, you can get a single control plane, which we call Tanzu Data Hub. So that's really our portfolio in a nutshell.
So let me ask you a couple questions and make a couple comments here. So first, Tanzu Postgres. So Postgres was one of those offerings, we've had MySQL from the commercial side, from the TAS, application service side for a while. Postgres is a relatively new offering. We've just brought that tile on, but this was huge, right? We've got the Gen AI tile, which Nick has talked about, the ability now to be able to do, Postgres on platform with Gen AI and do your applications on platform. That was huge, right? So, the fact that that's now out there is a good thing for everybody. Now, Greenplum, right, the big brother of this, that's not a tile on the commercial side, but it is something that people can connect to via user provided service or other mechanisms such as that. But Greenplum kind of takes Postgres to the next level, like you were saying, but it's not a native service on the platform, on Cloud Foundry or on the commercial side with Tanzu Application Service. And by the way, everybody, if you have not heard, Tanzu Application Service, we are going through a rebranding. It's now going to be Tanzu Platform for Cloud Foundry. So you're going to hear us say both names kind of interchangeably. Just when everybody was starting to get used to stop saying PCF and Pivotal Cloud Foundry to TAS, now we're changing it again to Tanzu Platform for Cloud Foundry. But, we did have a question. So I do want to talk about Valkey again. So Valkey was our kind of answer to the fact that Redis went commercial. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right. So it's a fork, but is it still based on the same bits?
Yep.
Okay? So this is is this going to come in as a new tile? Is this using the old Redis tile?
Yeah. So essentially, effective immediately, we're doing this is brand spanking new, because really the licensing change for Redis happened relatively frequently. Recently, I should say. So yeah, they're going to take the existing tile that runs on Cloud Foundry and just switch out those bits, right? Okay. And it's essentially Redis, open source Redis, but it's just rebranding, right? And I will say that the team has so for example, when we've continue to invest in the not only high availability but the fault tolerance features of our Valkey / Redis offering on Cloud Foundry. So for example, if you want a single instance Redis, you can absolutely do it. If you want clustering using, like, Redis has some different ways where you can have multiple instances kind of working together. So if one fails, you still have data on a backup. They have something called Sentinel, which was like a legacy way to do clustering. That they also have native clustering. So we are expanding our, I think it's already done. So you can have Sentinel basically have multiple instances of Redis, HA and fault tolerance, all running natively on Cloud Foundry for your application.
That's awesome, because I think that was kind of always one of the, I won't say weaknesses, but one of the weaknesses of Redis was kind of the HA portion of that on Foundation. And, everybody knows RabbitMQ, but I can't wait to get into Gemfire. I've got personal stories on Gemfire. I love this product as someone who is not a data guy. I love Gemfire and the ability, what it's going to be able to do. But, let's move on, man. This is great.
Just before if I can quickly ping on this one, Greg. So with Valkey and Redis, or basic caching, have we seen? I can speak personally, but have you seen many apps that get away without needing a caching solution? If you horizontally scale an app, you better be 100% stateless, or you better be synchronizing your state, for example, like getting session ID. It feels like table stakes for me. We need something like this in our modern apps if they're going to be resilient. But have you seen similar, or have you seen that as a kind of a sweet spot for where Redis played?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about the particular use cases. So, for example, it's whenever you need consistent state across multiple instances of your app. A lot of, for example, I just had a conversation with a customer, financial customer. They have many apps that need to know the latest and greatest state for some reference data, right?
Yep.
That's a perfect use case for something like a Redis, right? Where you could have multiple instances, they all see the same data, and especially when they're user facing, right? You
Mhm.
know, user facing, when you click a button, that button needs to respond back as quick as possible, right? And a lot of times those disk-based solutions, right? You know, disk has had lots of improvements over the years to be more to be faster, but you just can't beat in memory access, right? So in many cases, you can get like single digit milliseconds, sub milliseconds response time that really helps with the user experience of your web based applications. And also, like a traditional thing is like session caching, right?
Yeah.
So when I log into a website, right, and I have a shopping cart, for example, right, when your applications are scaled across multiple instances, right? And your load balancer, your typical load balancers can be either sticky or they could be just kind of non-sticky to be able to rotate against any app. The best scalability is to be able to rotate against any app, because if they're sticky, right, and that app fails, right, then your session data is gone and your shopping cart information is
Great.
gone, right? So that's why like session caching and things like that are dedicated to some sort of in-memory solution, so that as those apps scaled as they come and go, as many stateful applications do, you can still maintain or get that data from these low latency solutions like Redis, and also Gemfire is
Right.
perfect for those use cases also.
And before we move on, we're going to take one question from the audience first, but I'm going to ask the first question and kind of give an explanation here. So, as the audience is looking at these, they're like, okay, this is great. Most of these I can get open source. Why on Cloud Foundry? My answer to that is yeah, they are open source. But when you go out, let's look at what the process is to stand up a Redis or a Postgres instance. You got to go get the bits. You got to provision a server. You got to wait for the networking team to get that wired up. Got to wait for the firewall team to open up the ports. Why on Cloud Foundry? Because you can do this in minutes, right? What I have seen, through my own experience, I've seen Postgres and MySQL instances take months to get up from an operations and an IT team. Whereas, hey, come to Cloud Foundry, we can have one up in 5 minutes. So if you're asking that question, why do I want to run my services on Cloud Foundry? There's two reasons. One, near real time bringing it up, right? We're talking, less than an hour for any service that you want to bring up. And two, it sits on the same infrastructure as your application does. You can't really get any faster than sitting on the same infrastructure.
I try on top of that, Nikki. Once you have it up and running, the whole issue of secrets management and getting a connection to that from the application when it gets deployed is a whole other can of worms that can take a lot of time, a lot of pain.
Yep. And the ability to rotate those credentials, right?
Yep.
So how many people do you have to notify? What applications have to go in and change those credential managements? You bring this up on Cloud Foundry, those credentials are created for you automatically. They're rotated when you need them to be rotated, and there really takes no extra effort from the developer. So, question from the audience: Anbu, a great friend of the channel. He's on with us every week and has actually got our, he's responsible for our signature sign off. But is Greenplum now closed source?
Yes, it is closed source. There's still some open source bits, but going forward, all of the new and latest and greatest features are going to be put into our version of Greenplum. So yes.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Next slide.
All right. Well, this really ties into the question as you gentlemen were preaching. Like,
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead of you there, Greg.
No. This is awesome stuff. I'm excited that you're highlighting it, because these data products are awesome, right? They're popular. They're everywhere. and and they have they solve different problems, right? They have different data solutions to solve different data problems. But one thing that's universal about all of them, you need a platform to be able to run them easily. Like that's the goal, right? You want to be able to run it easily. Like day one operation. That means, hey, I provisioned this instance for you, right? Great. It's available. It's up and running. Well, what about day two? Now it's up and running. Now I need to keep it up and running, and I need to run it efficiently. And what if something happens, right? Am I getting a pager? A pager. People don't do pages anymore.
Pager duty.
Like I said, I've been around for a while. Okay, I remember pages. Okay, you're getting a text message at the middle of the night. Hey, how about have a platform that not only knows how to fix instances, not to restart instances of an app, but actually is specifically trained how to fix a specific data service. Like some of these are distributed in nature, right? So there's all things that you need to do to rebalance the connections and the data and all of that stuff, right? Just baked into the platform itself.
So,
now, I did prepare a demo. I'm not sure if we're going to get to do the demo, but I have a demo for every single data service, and I tell you, the lead time that it would take to demo all of these, to stand them up, to build applications that will bind to them, would not be a day or so. It would be weeks, sometimes, as Nick mentioned, months. But with a platform like Cloud Foundry, like Nikki said, hey, can you talk? I was like, yeah, just give me an instance, man. I'm ready to go because of its Cloud Foundry, because it's so easy.
Greg, you hit on the topic that we've said before about apps, about resiliency. And one layer beyond that is self-healing. I remember it was in this proof of concept. We were a couple of weeks in rolling out the platform in the Northeast here with a customer. And at the end of it, they did resiliency failure. So they basically killed something. And not only did they see no business impact, but they saw that something getting redeployed. Now you see that with the apps when you push and say, I want 3 running, you'll always get 3 running. And if one goes away, it'll get replaced. But even in the services, because we got Bosch under these services, they can work for them too. So we're talking about resilient services that can actually heal, which is a whole other level of pain to try and set up in any other way.
Well, and the other thing that we always kind of leave out of this, we're always talking about resiliency and what this means in production, but let's not forget the innovation factor here, right? I've got an application, I'm using MySQL today. Will it run better on Postgres? Well, you could try that out on a platform.
Yeah.
You can't do that, with bare metal, because you're talking, we got to find the server, we got to install it for something that may take me 3 days just to figure out it's not going to work, or, hey, it absolutely works for you. So a platform like this takes innovation for applications, and it gives the developers a lot of choice and the ability to go in and try new things, right? Is Gemfire or Redis the best one for me? You can try that on a platform like this. In a week, you can have that answered. You can't even get the services enabled outside of a platform in a week.
It's funny. Just yesterday, I was using Spring AI. We're at Milestone 1 on Spring AI. You had David on a few weeks ago showing that. And I was working on a RAG application, so a retrieval augmented generation. So I needed a vector store. And I'm in my platform, and I tried clicking create service on Postgres. And I know you had it, Greg, on the Greenplum side. But we got PG vector sitting in regular Postgres as well. And I literally just collected it, click bind service, and restage the app. 3 commands. It was awesome. Didn't even see the connection string. Didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as you mentioned, right? Now the beauty of easy provisioning, self-healing capabilities are just the applications and the ability to inject application credentials. Everything that application needs to do is, again, all handled by the platform. So I know, I have the Spring icon here, right? So it's right. Really, Cloud Foundry is the best way to run Spring applications, but it's also the way you can easily connect these Spring applications to these data services. But as Nikki mentioned, right, it's not just limited to just Spring and Java-based applications. You can run any workload that you can containerize. You can run on this platform.
Yep. Python, Node, and going back to kind of the speed. I just want to let everybody know as we started preparing for this show yesterday, and to what Gregory said, he's like, "Hey man, I need a place to run this. Here's a platform." He was able to get every one of these services installed, build a demo for each one of them, and walk through it. And we just started preparing for the show yesterday, right? We had the concept, but the ability to try that somewhere else. I dare you.
Yep. And here are the services. So Nikki gave me the keys to the toolbox, and I went to town. He gave me admin access.
I love it.
Access? Woo! So I started creating every single service I can, and not only these services,
runaway quotas.
but the applications that are using these services, right? So it's and for those of you who do not know, this is what's called the ops man, or the application management. So you can get like a view of all of, let me go to the top view, like all of the organizations. So if you want to break down your teams and their workloads into organizations, you have spaces within those organizations, right? And then you have applications that are running, and then you can give those applications services, those data services. So these are the data services, right? Yep. And these are actually created instances of the data services that we've been talking about, right? Which again, I just created everything in a couple of days.
Yeah, and if you go back and look, none of those applications that you were showing more than 24 hours, updated, right? Yep. So everything within the last hour, within 20 hours is the longest time that something's been out, before it was updated. So again, try to do that on bare metal.
Yeah,
sure.
Awesome. So, and to touch on it a little bit, let's dive into a little bit more, because Mark, you mentioned about the resiliency and the teams, that was doing things like HA testing, fault tolerance testing, right?
Right.
I was Dick's Sporting Goods. They did something that was legendary. So I came from our labs organization. Our labs organization is what's traditionally called professional services. We had something called data transformation team that was part of Pivotal Labs. So anyway, I had an engagement with them, and this was right after some of the team members at Dick's Sporting Goods did a Spring One session. And we were talking about the session, and it was almost like they told us what they did, and I almost couldn't believe it. Yeah. They were on the show. They told people, go to our website and search for something, whatever it was. just search for some products. And they said,
remember this.
And what we're going to be doing, we're going to be killing services in production. Let us know if you have an issue. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
you're gonna be. I can understand standing up some demo environment, right, and say, hey, here's this demo environment. I'll show you how resilient it is. But actually killing services in production that can affect your revenue, that's like unheard of. That just speaks to how trusted the platform is, right? We talk about like the efficiency that you get from as an operator point of view. So many of these data services are, they're distributed, right? Like something like RabbitMQ, right? You can have like a cluster of RabbitMQ cluster of servers. Again, so that if one goes down, you have other ones that kind of pick up the slack, right? And I talked about how I love doing these demos. But imagine if Nick told me, I need you to do a demo tomorrow of RabbitMQ. Now imagine if I had to go out, I had to provision 3 physical servers. I had to install the operating system. I had to configure the operating system, whatever RabbitMQ needs for best practices like file descriptors or kernel settings or whatever. And then Rabbit, for example, it runs on a runtime engine, like Gemfire too. It runs on the Java runtime, right? installing the runtime engine, configuring the runtime engine, and then doing that for 3 times for a cluster of 3, or like Gemfire, if I want to really show like high availability, I can maybe scale it up to 5 nodes, right? I would not have as much fun setting that up, and it versus just going to the platform and say, hey, provision me an instance of Gemfire, RabbitMQ, or Postgres, or MySQL, or Redis, and so on and so forth, right? And then, as Nikki mentioned, within minutes, having that instance up and running. But not only that, what are the superpowers that what allows us to really not only ease because anybody can do like a Terraform script and have automation to provision these services like in a distributed fashion, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's doing that, right? But what everybody is not doing is having a piece of software, an intelligent piece of software, like like that has the knowledge to know how to provision these instances correctly. And as I mentioned before, knows how to auto heal them correctly. And as the product evolves over time, like RabbitMQ 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's like night and day difference.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, is your Terraform scripts able to keep up with all of the changes that's needed where you need to rebalance or upgrade a RabbitMQ instance? I probably not. But there is an operator, a software instance, which in the Cloud Foundry world is called a tile. So there's tiles that run on Bosch, and it's almost like hiring Nikki or hiring Mark that has knowledge that knows how to do this, except it's just baked into the infrastructure.
And we were actually kind of talking about something like this just last week, Gregory, right? What the difference is between commercial, which we consider the tile, right, that comes packaged up, versus open source, and where should a customer choose, or why would they choose one if they have something against open source, or they want to use open source, they don't want to use the commercial side. And one of the things that we kind of explained out is that the real difference here is really not commercial versus open source, it's packaged versus unpackaged, right? So we've got the open source RabbitMQ, we've got Postgres out there. The open source version is unpackaged. It's the bits. You've got to be responsible for building them. You've got to be responsible for deploying them. Whereas the, quote unquote commercial side, what we put in the package is tailored to run on Cloud Foundry. It has that operator, like you said, it's got the hooks into Bosch to make sure that, it stays up. And, I think that's one of the things that I think we kind of need to work on is, yes, it's a commercial side. What are the benefits of the commercial side? It comes packaged with all the resiliency, with the ability to hook into Bosch and make sure that its health is up. Whereas the open source, you've got to do that yourself. There's the main advantages. And that's how you get that reduction in operator time. This is why Cloud Foundry or, Tanzu Application Service is able to see 200, 300, 500 to 1 developer to operator ratios, is because of the efficiencies that we build into these packaging.
I would go one beyond that, Nikki. I would say that not only does it give you the bits from a safe location packaged for HA, but it's pretty unique platform in that it lets you create curated t-shirt sizes, pre-configured versions. So that in turn leads a pretty unique thing of self-service provisioning, where based on the tenant, the user within the platform, their role will let them actually create services inside their spaces. And that's, again, unique. We see the keys to the Terraform engine not exactly been given to everybody. We see DevOps teams taking care of a lot of this stuff. The autonomy and that parallelism to let different teams work autonomously. I've seen customers going to 3, 4, 5,000 instances of Rabbit or Redis or similar from the marketplace because of that setup. It was being governed centrally, but they were not managing the individual life cycles themselves, which is really, next level.
Well, and to add even on top of that, right, is, going on back on that self-service process of this is when you install a RabbitMQ or a Postgres, you're not just installing a RabbitMQ or Postgres, you're installing 5 or 6, right? Because there's this concept of plans. Do you need a 5 gig database? Do you need a 500 gig database, right? You can create those plans and put those out for the developers to consume as they see fit. So it's not just a single install. It's the process by which to install it, how you need it, that self-service aspect. And that's something that you're only going to get from a platform as well.
For fear of stealing more Greg's thunder, Nikki, I know you got a Gemfire story for us. I know it goes beyond. It's one of those unique ones where we went outside of the foundation, and we were able to get cross-region replication going in 45 minutes, was it?
So we're going to steer your conversation here a little bit, Gregory, but one, we're not going to be able to get through all your demos. You're absolutely right. We're already 40 minutes in. This conversation's going great.
This
so
is
we're
great.
This is great. We're going to have you back on the show because I know some of your demos and I know people are going to want to see them. But yeah, to switch into that Gemfire conversation, this is a product that I absolutely love. I mean, it is a supercomputer in memory for applications. From personal experience, we use Gemfire. We had an application at the company that I used to work for before I came over to VMware Broadcom. And it was a pharmaceutical application. And we were over multiple data centers. They were having latency issues with their database, and Gemfire is what we used. What really, again, not the data guy, but what really astounded me about this is it literally, and Mark helped me with this. It was 30 minutes, I think, Mark. We ended up putting this huge in-memory database, cross-replicating between our two data centers, and virtually erased any latency that the application was needing to get their data. It was, I always refer to it, like you said, supercomputer in memory. This is one of those products that I don't think enough people know about. And, I would love for you to dig into Gemfire, but we're taking you kind of off your flow of what you're going to do here.
I just want to try it. In my mind, and that's what I brought up earlier, you need some sort of caching engine outside of your modern application so that you run 2, 3, 4, 5 of them in your cluster. Any one of them can go away. The shopping cart doesn't empty. But what Nikki did here was he managed to make the shopping cart not proverbially empty, even if you lose a region.
Yep.
Which is pretty amazing. And he did it in 30 minutes,
yep.
which is unprecedented. And I don't see many solutions that do that. And this was without depending on a hyperscaler. This was private.
Yeah, this is all on-prem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you guys, Gemfire is a product that I absolutely love. And one knock on Gemfire that I've seen that's pretty universal is it's not easy or straightforward to manage, because when you think about it's a distributed in-memory database. I mentioned I see it all the times. It's maybe distributed across 5 servers, for example. And what you could also do is you could have it distributed across multiple geographical locations and have it all almost in real time sync. I update the East Coast, and whatever the latency, the time between the two, that's how much the latency, how long it takes to synchronize to the West Coast, for example, or another data center, right? But now, again, now you're just adding it when you're running on the platform. It's now you're just being able to easily provision and set up those fairly involved structures and be able to scale it out really, really efficiently.
And that was one of our, I don't know if you remember this, Mark, but that was one of our acceptance tests. So when we did this for my old company, we had the same thing. We had a data center on the West Coast, data center on the East Coast. They were having data latency issues. We literally brought up 2 command windows and using the command line for Gemfire, we had the commands already typed out and ready. All we had to do is hit enter, literally hit enter to add the key pair into Gemfire on one computer. Before I could hit enter on the other side, it was already synced. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's an informal test, but it was one of those that was considered, an acceptance test. And when the developers and the business unit saw that, they were absolutely blown away. They thought we were doing something,
I remember
doing something sneaky.
It couldn't even measure it, right? It's not like you're using an Oracle solution or any database. It's just a completely different level of order of magnitude and latency. Mm-hmm. I remember, Nikki, I think you were saying they couldn't even see it. Net of network latency, they weren't even seeing it. I want one more shout out on Gemfire, hot off the press. I see Gemfire Vector DB up on the Spring AI side. We've added vector store support to Gemfire as well. So imagine that class of AI app where you really need super fast lookups on your vector store. How about having that in memory? That's a really interesting new space we're getting into there too.
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, so we've touched on a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to move to the second slide, which
We've
basically this just
destroyed his flow.
no, 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 no,
We've
no. This is great.
Don't
This
say
is
what I was-
great. This is
Gregory
absolutely
came in
great.
with the plan, and we punched it right in the face and said, "No, we're gonna completely destroy your flow."
Hey, excitement about data is always a good thing. So
Yes.
I just want to mention really quickly because this basically speaks to the fact that, like, suppose you have applications running somewhere, and you're fired up on what Mark said. You're fired up what Nikki said about the power of Gemfire, for example, or the power of RabbitMQ. But you maybe not. You're not ready for all of your applications to move to Cloud Foundry. Or maybe you need, like, you're having trouble managing Postgres or managing MySQL, right? And you want an easy button to be able to provision those, and also have the auto healing stuff for the database point of view that Mark mentioned, right? Well, this is a use case that I really want to see us grow, and this whole notion of having a service gateway. With the service gateway, you can think of it as, if your app when your applications are off platform, they can still access and utilize these great services, but have the platform manage it for you. So think about, like, from a relational point of view, right? If you're doing like analytics, you have like Juniper notebooks or Tableau notebooks. You're doing a visualization in Microsoft BI or something like that. You just want to access these databases. Well, deploy it on Cloud Foundry with a click, and then enable the service gateway, and then boom, you can utilize that data that's managed on the cloud for you, right? For any one of these data services.
I want to call out. I did this yesterday, and to enable one of your services, say Postgres, it is literally one extra flag in this when you do your bind or your create. Super easy. It's not a big effort. The gateway itself, the service gateway, is configured by the platform for you. All you're doing is asking for that entry point port, which is great.
Yep. And if you're a platform engineer and you want to steal business from your IT teams, this is the way you do it. And I speak from experience, right? So with Service Gateway, and I do believe that every data service that we are putting out from the Tanzu side now is requiring that Service Gateway access come with it. But, again, it goes back to, I can provision one of these instances in minutes versus an IT team that may take weeks or months to do so. So if you're a platform engineer, you're wanting to grow your platform, this is absolutely a great use case. And it was something that I've personally done, is to set up these data service only foundations.
Yep.
And you can use your orgs and spaces to break these services out so that you're giving your RabbitMQ admins access to go in and mess with the RabbitMQ instances. And same thing with Postgres and MySQL. But if your developers are having a hard time getting data services stood up, this is where a Cloud Foundry platform engineer can come in and say, I can solve all your problems and just be a hero.
Think about it. You're going to have a leader follower Postgres with an SLA where it's doing an S3 backup, right? Every 4 hours, every 10 hours, every 24 hours, whatever it is. And that could be the t-shirt size. That could be the button click.
Yep.
That's the RTO, RTP we're going to have for this tier of database. Boom, done. Yep. And then you have a process if you have to do a restore from a catastrophic recovery, but you also have the follower getting elected as being a leader.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this last couple of minutes, I'll just highlight a couple of these data services. So, for example, we've been talking about Gemfire, right? So Gemfire, I got a provision here, Gemfire for Tanzu application service, but I also there's a new feature within, or a new service within Gemfire. It's something called the Gemfire console. So again, awesome. As we've been talking about, Gemfire is an in-memory in-memory database. It's traditionally, it was called an in-memory data grid, right? And what it allows you to do is you have locators and servers. Servers are where the data is. So if I have more and more data, like if I have terabytes of data, like we got some customers that got hundreds of terabytes of data all in memory. Like, for example, MasterCard, right? people who don't know Gemfire, right? The same people who don't know Gemfire, they have a MasterCard credit card. So you should thank Gemfire for all of those really fast, latency transactions, because every credit card transaction for MasterCard goes over Gemfire. But Gemfire has these notions of like you can store your data in entities or tables, which are called regions, and I can do queries on that data. All of that data is I don't have monitoring enabled on this instance, but for example, if I have product data, it's almost like Gemfire is like a combination of a document database. So think about like combining the document database capabilities of MongoDB with the scalability of something like Cassandra. These are like really popular open source databases, right? Combining that with doing the full text search capabilities of Elasticsearch, in addition to being able to do things like if you're doing AI ML, if you want to do like a vector database, how about doing that in memory with really low latency and distributed, right? And to do things like queries, for example, right? So I got some data here. I can query that data just like almost like a relational database, right? So here it's a key value pair. So I'm looking at the key, I'm looking at the value, I'm looking at one attribute within the value, right? So these are the things that you could do with Gemfire. So it's like SQL, right? It's almost like Postgres. So all of these things, and that's why it's been so hard to classify. Like, what is Gemfire? It's like so many things. You could do so many useful things with it. It's really, really powerful.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but it's going to have unprecedented performance for queries on mutating data.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you could do all of the things that you do with traditional databases, like you could do indexes and things like that. But just think about it. Now, nothing is on disk. All of that disk latency that was introduced is removed, and you're almost doing it like it's almost like a grid computing. So you remember like back in the day with Hadoop, right? They had map reduce and like functions. That was huge, right? You got functions. I don't have any functions deploy here, but you got functions in Gemfire that almost like it's like, for example, you like Apache Spark, right? Apache Spark has like a distributed compute use case. You could do some of those Apache Spark like workloads in a distributed fashion, all using Gemfire, right? In addition to the WAN replication capabilities that we talked about. So
well, in one other use case, which I'm not sure a lot of people know about, but going back to kind of that story of data lakes and mainframe, databases that we've got, one of the things that developers have a hard time with is, hey, I want to use this data, but my schema is a little bit different, or I want to display it in a different way, right? Maybe the database is showing every name as first name, last name as one field. I want to split that up. That is something that Gemfire can help you do. They can transform that data for you for your applications without having to make any changes to the main primary database. Right. So your team can go in and use the data how they see fit. And if they sync that back, it will transform it back into the way that the original database holds it. So, from a developer standpoint, think about not having to say, hey, I need to make a schema change and I've got to go inform 30 other application teams. I want to make this, schema change, and then going through that approval process. With Gemfire, you can take that data in, you can transform it, you can use it yourself. And now you're responsible for the schema, but you can still translate it back to the original.
Yeah, Vicky, I just had this conversation with a major financial company. I'll stop sharing. And they had that exact use case where as the pieces of the data comes in, they want to aggregate. They want to have some canned view such that when somebody like a financial advisor, for example, when they want to get at that data, they're getting the aggregated view. If they know the key, they know some identifier, they just get it out. There's no computation at retrieval time. The computation is at insert time, and it's all like distributed. It's all event based, like so, based on creating records, updating records, right? And you actually putting your intelligence, that aggregation intelligence, on the grid, and it's just Java.
Yep.
You could bring along any Java library you wanted, run it in a distributed fashion. You just don't get that power and that scalability from typical data solutions.
Yep. 100% agree. I mean, it is, if there is a superhero in the data world, in my view, it's Gemfire. And, it wasn't our intent, Gregory, to turn this into the Gemfire show. We're definitely going to have you come back and do some of the demos because I've seen them. They're awesome. But, it's amazing how fast an hour can go when you're talking about things that everybody knows is out there, everybody takes for granted, but nobody thinks about. These are the things that make your application worth it. And, when you look at things, again, having that distributed grid, being able to get instantaneous data back from your database, these are things that can make a difference between your app being number one and some other company's app being number one. And it's things that you got to think about.
I remember an app we did for a logistics firm years ago. It was a prototype, and it was Gemfire at the back, and it was telemetry from a whole fleet of vehicles across the country. And the guys had it on a mashup on a map with real-time telemetry done in like a week. It was awesome. Yep. And it's a perfect back end for that.
And I got to also put a plug in for another product. So I know I shouldn't have favorites, Nikki and Mark.
Everybody has favorites, Gregory.
But I do.
So
Gemfire is up there. But I would say another one of my favorites is RabbitMQ.
Yeah, screaming, baby.
Let me tell you, most customers are using about, I would say, 10 to 20% of the capabilities of RabbitMQ. When I was a developer, or when I was in the professional services organization, I thought I knew RabbitMQ. I was like, yeah, I just send it to somewhere and it goes somewhere else and that's it. I was like, but then when I started, I joined this pre-sales team and now I'm advocating for all of the things that RabbitMQ, I'm like, wow, event streaming, event log use cases, message priorities and things like that. They even have something called streams, and it's so powerful. They have a feature called super streams. So I'm just going to plug in that for the follow-up conversations also.
Well, for all you parents out there, you all say, I love all my kids equally, but everybody knows there's that one child that you love just a little bit more than the rest. Yeah.
No, I gotta say on the streaming stuff, I saw the Rabbit streams, the performance numbers are just insane.
Yeah.
It's so fast.
Yeah, I saw one benchmark. It said it was about 17 million messages per second for messages about 1 kilobyte. I was like, that's insane.
Yeah.
But then somebody, I think Howard, who's the PM, he said, oh no, the team just reached I think he said 19 million messages per second. I was like, oh, okay. Just add another 2 million. Okay.
There you go.
It's hard for your mind to even kind of get that concept going that you're processing that much. And
they're breaking physics over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Now, does the RabbitMQ streaming, does that work with Spring Streams or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And that's another thing we could definitely go into, which is next time, which is, so there's something called, we're really big on Spring, and there's something called Spring Cloud Data Flow. Mm-hmm. And Spring Cloud Data Flow, maybe I could show that really quick. No, we only got 1 minute left. But yeah, you can enable reusable Spring apps to use RabbitMQ streams. So imagine you're populating Gemfire from data in Rabbit, and suppose you wanted to have another database like a Postgres. You want to have a copy of everything that was sent to RabbitMQ. You can use streams, and then you can replay that data. So now you start using RabbitMQ as another source of truth, and you can replay it and build, any different databases.
So here's what I'm seeing, right? Because we didn't get to any of your demos, and they're great demos. We've talked about a lot of concepts here. Here's what I'm thinking. Man, I would love to be able to get, because we're going to have you back on the show. Absolutely, Greg. You've got too much information not to. But what I'd like to see is maybe we can grab like a Dan Vega or Deshaun Carter, they can come in and do the spring side and talk about from the applications perspective, this is what it looks like, and have you on the other side saying from the data side, this is what it looks like, and kind of do that mashup. I think we could make a whole series just out of, hey, here's a day for Postgres, here's a day for RabbitMQ. I see a lot more of this coming on. So what do you think? You willing to do that with us?
It would be my honor, gentlemen.
Man, I love watching you speak. I love watching you present. You've got such a measure about yourself on how you explain these things, Gregory. I really appreciate you coming on. And, Mark, always great to have you on. Won't be the last time we see you. So, love the audience. Thank y'all for those that watched today, those that are going to watch the recording later. Remember to hit that subscribe button. We're doing this every Thursday. We've got new content coming out. Make sure you hit the notify button so that you know when it comes out, and definitely subscribe. We live off of subscription. So, just want to say thank you, everybody out there. Gregory, Mark, thanks for being on today. Really appreciate it. And then, as customary on Boo, you did it for us. We always sign off with CF BY. So 3, 2, 1. CF BY.